It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon at a small, family-owned diner on the outskirts of Orlando. The lunch rush had ended, leaving only a few patrons enjoying late lunches or early dinners. Among them was Shaquille O'Neal, known to most as Shaq, the larger-than-life basketball legend and towering figure with a heart as big as his frame. Shaq was known for his friendliness and his habit of stopping by small businesses, grabbing a meal, and spending time chatting with locals. This diner was one of his favorites. A cozy, no-frills place where the food was homey, and the people treated him like just another customer. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. As he settled into his booth, taking a sip of his drink and glancing over the menu, he noticed a young boy at a nearby table with his mother. The child couldn't have been more than 5, with curly hair, big curious eyes, and a face that held the innocent wonder only young children seem to possess. The boy's mother was chatting with the server, and the little boy, bored and restless, kept sneaking glances at Shaq, eyes wide as if he'd just seen a superhero. Shaq, used to the occasional stares and whispers, offered the boy a friendly nod and a smile, which made the boy grin shyly and look away. After a few minutes, Shaq went back to his menu, deciding on his order. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the little boy was still watching him. Sure enough, when he glanced up again, the boy had inched his way closer, now standing just a few feet from Shaq's booth. His mother, noticing her son's movement, seemed about to call him back, but Shaq smiled at her, signaling that it was okay. "Hey there, buddy," Shaq greeted the boy with his deep, gentle voice. "What's your name?" The boy blinked up at him, almost mesmerized by Shaq's size and presence, before whispering, "Evan." "Nice to meet you, Evan." Shaq extended a massive hand, and the boy shyly shook it, his small hand nearly lost in Shaq's. "Are you having fun here with your mom?" The boy nodded, a hint of hesitation in his eyes. He seemed to want to say something more, his lips parted, but he glanced over his shoulder at his mother, who was watching them with a fond smile. "Is something on your mind, Evan?" Shaq asked gently, sensing the boy's hesitance. Evan looked back at him, his expression shifting to something more serious. He leaned in close, his voice barely a whisper as he said, "I need your help." Shaq's smile faltered, and he leaned closer, the laughter lines around his eyes smoothing as he focused on the little boy. "What kind of help do you need, Evan?" Evan's eyes darted around as though checking to see if anyone else could hear him. His voice, soft and almost trembling, sent a chill through Shaq's spine as he whispered, "I think someone's watching us." The boy's words were barely audible, but the intensity in his gaze and the way his little body tensed was unmistakable. Shaq's heart thumped harder as he looked around, wondering if this was a child's overactive imagination or something more. He noticed no one out of the ordinary, just a few other diners, a couple of cooks visible through the kitchen window, and the cheerful server chatting with Evan's mom. "Who's watching us, Evan?" Shaq asked, keeping his voice low and calm to avoid alarming the boy or anyone else. Evan's tiny hand lifted, and he pointed subtly to the far end of the diner near the windows. "That man," he whispered. Following the direction of Evan's finger, Shaq's eyes landed on a man seated alone at a corner booth. The man wore a dark hoodie and sunglasses, his head tilted down as he stirred a cup of coffee. Shaq's trained eyes immediately noticed something strange. While the man appeared to be casually sipping his coffee, his attention was focused on Evan and his mother. Shaq's years on and off the court had taught him how to read people, and there was something about this man that set off alarm bells in his mind. He turned back to Evan, who was now visibly frightened, clinging to Shaq's arm. Shaq placed a comforting hand on the boy's shoulder, giving him a reassuring squeeze. "You did good, Evan. I'm here, all right? Nothing's going to happen to you or your mom." Evan's eyes softened a little, though he still clung to Shaq, his fingers gripping Shaq's arm tightly. Shaq knew he had to act quickly, but he didn't want to draw attention and scare the man off before help could arrive. Keeping his movements as inconspicuous as possible, Shaq reached into his pocket for his phone. He dialed 911, his voice low but firm as he reported the situation to the dispatcher. They promised to send officers immediately and instructed him to stay calm and avoid any sudden movements that might alert the suspicious man. As they waited, Shaq kept his gaze fixed on the man in the corner booth. Every time the man shifted, his eyes flitted back to Evan and his mother. Shaq's stomach twisted. He didn't know who this guy was or what he wanted, but he was determined to keep Evan and his mother safe. A few tense minutes later, the faint sound of sirens cut through the quiet of the diner. The suspicious man's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the parking lot as he realized the police were closing in. Shaq tensed, ready to step in if the man tried anything, but to his relief, the officers entered swiftly and discreetly, heading straight for the booth. The man tried to make a dash for the back exit, but Shaq had anticipated this. Rising to his full height, he moved swiftly to block the path, his large frame leaving the man nowhere to go. One of the officers grabbed the man's arm, and within seconds, they had him restrained and in cuffs. As they let him out, the officer nodded gratefully at Shaq. "Thank you, Mr. O'Neal. We've been looking for this guy for a while. He's a wanted felon." Shaq's shoulders relaxed, the tension melting away as the threat was finally removed. He looked down at Evan, who was still clinging to his hand, his face a mixture of relief and awe. "Is he gone?" Evan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Shaq knelt down to his level, giving him a reassuring smile. "Yeah, buddy, he's gone. You did really good. You know that? You were very brave." Evan beamed, his earlier fear replaced with pride. His mother came over, wrapping her son in a tight hug as she thanked Shaq repeatedly, tears glistening in her eyes. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Shaq gave her a warm smile, brushing off her gratitude with a wave of his hand. "Just glad I could help," he said. "Evan here was the real hero." The diner staff and remaining customers, who had watched the scene unfold, began to applaud softly, their faces filled with admiration and relief. Shaq felt a surge of warmth and gratitude toward them, thankful that this little diner, and this small, tight-knit community, was a place where people looked out for each other. After the commotion died down and the police finished gathering statements, Shaq returned to his booth, but his mind kept replaying the events. The bravery of a young boy who, despite his fear, had trusted him and spoken up. The courage it had taken for Evan to approach a stranger with a plea for help. It struck Shaq deeply, reminding him of the importance of always being open to those around us, of always listening, watching, and being ready to act when someone needs help. Before he left the diner, Shaq called Evan over one more time. "Evan," he said, grinning as he handed the boy his number written on a napkin. "If you ever need anything, you call me, all right?" Evan's eyes went wide as he clutched the napkin like a prized possession. "I will," he promised, beaming up at Shaq. Shaq drove away from the diner, but his mind was still with Evan and the tense, surreal events that had just unfolded. He couldn't help but marvel at the courage of the 5-year-old boy who had, against every instinct to stay silent, spoken up when he sensed danger. Shaq's own path had led him to countless memorable moments and achievements, but somehow, in that small diner, he'd experienced something uniquely profound. As he drove, Shaq considered calling a few friends, sharing the strange turn his afternoon had taken, but each time he reached for his phone, he stopped. Somehow, this experience felt personal. It felt like something he wanted to let settle in his mind, maybe even keep to himself, at least for now. He pulled over at a park, needing some quiet to process it all. Stepping out, he walked to a bench beneath the sprawling oak trees, where the filtered sunlight cast gentle patterns on the ground. Sitting there, Shaq couldn't help but think about his own childhood. Growing up, he'd had to navigate a world that didn't always feel safe. He remembered the constant moving due to his father's military service, each new place a new challenge, a new set of kids he had to either befriend or at times defend himself from. That feeling of being a child in an uncertain world had lingered, even into adulthood. Shaq hadn't always felt secure or protected, but he had his mother's unwavering support, a guiding presence that helped him find his way. It struck him that he might have just become that sense of protection for Evan, even if just for a day. He'd been the adult who had made a scary world feel a little safer. The thought gave Shaq a deep sense of fulfillment. It wasn't the fame, the championship rings, or the record-breaking stats that defined him in this moment. Instead, it was this chance meeting, this simple moment of being there when it mattered most. As he continued to sit quietly, he realized he felt a lingering responsibility to Evan. Sure, he'd given the boy his number, but was that enough? In the whirlwind of fame, it was easy for well-intentioned promises to fade into memory. Shaq knew that if he truly wanted to make a difference, he'd need to follow through. The kid had looked up to him with those trusting eyes, and Shaq didn't want to let him down. With a renewed sense of purpose, Shaq decided to head back to his place and figure out what he could do for Evan and his mom. On the way, he thought about how much of a difference a little extra security could make for the two of them. This man in the diner had clearly targeted them for a reason. Whether it was a personal vendetta or something else entirely, Shaq didn't know, but he wanted to help protect them however he could. The following day, Shaq reached out to a private security company he trusted. He arranged for a consultation and, after speaking with Evan's mom, set up a security system for their house. He insisted on covering the cost, knowing that peace of mind was something you couldn't put a price tag on. Evan's mother was overwhelmed with gratitude, but Shaq brushed it off with his usual humility. "It's the least I can do," he told her. "I want to make sure you and Evan feel safe in your own home." As the days passed, Shaq continued to check in with them, establishing a friendship that was grounded not in celebrity status or superficiality, but in genuine care and connection. He learned more about Evan, too, discovering that the boy had a strong passion for drawing and dreams of becoming an artist. Every time they spoke, Evan would show him his latest drawings, pictures of superheroes, dragons, and to Shaq's amusement, one impressive drawing of a basketball game where a giant figure dunked the ball while fans cheered. Shaq knew who that was supposed to be and couldn't help but laugh, praising Evan for his artistic talent. One afternoon, as they were talking, Shaq had an idea. With Evan's love for superheroes and his evident bravery, Shaq thought it might be a great experience for him to meet some real-life heroes. Shaq had a few friends on the Orlando Police Department, and he quickly arranged a tour for Evan and his mom, making sure they could meet some of the officers who had responded to the diner that day. The department was more than happy to oblige, thrilled to have a young fan who admired them. The day of the tour was one Evan wouldn't soon forget. Shaq accompanied him, keeping a low profile so the spotlight would stay on Evan. The officers showed him around the station, letting him see the inside of a police car, and even gave him a chance to try on a child-sized police hat. Evan's eyes lit up as he absorbed every detail, asking questions with the wide-eyed curiosity only a young child could have. Shaq watched with pride as Evan laughed, his earlier fears from the diner incident seeming to melt away. As the tour ended, one of the officers presented Evan with a small honorary police badge. It wasn't much, but to Evan, it was a symbol of courage, a token that reminded him he was capable of standing up for what was right. Seeing Evan's beaming face, Shaq felt a rush of gratitude, realizing how powerful it was to be able to influence a young life in such a positive way. Over the next few months, Shaq stayed in touch with Evan and his mom, frequently checking in and occasionally inviting them to his events and charity outings. He was careful not to overwhelm them, knowing they valued their privacy, but he made sure they knew he was just a phone call away. In turn, Evan's mother became a friend, often updating Shaq on Evan's drawings and his latest interests. Through these interactions, Shaq began to understand how much the friendship meant to Evan. The boy didn't just see him as a famous basketball player, he saw him as someone he could count on, someone who had his back. One evening, Shaq received a call from Evan's mom. She sounded excited, her voice filled with pride as she explained that Evan had won a local art contest for kids his age. The piece he had submitted was none other than the drawing he'd made of Shaq dunking a basketball. Evan had told her that the drawing represented courage, how he'd felt that day in the diner when Shaq had made him feel safe. Shaq's heart swelled with pride and emotion. This was the kind of impact he'd always hoped to have, a reminder that even the smallest actions could make a lifelong difference. That weekend, he surprised Evan by attending the award ceremony, making sure to keep a low profile until Evan was called to the stage. As Evan accepted his award, he noticed Shaq standing in the crowd smiling proudly. His face lit up, and with the innocent joy of a 5-year-old, he waved wildly. After the ceremony, Shaq approached Evan and his mom, pulling them both into a hug. "You're a true artist, Evan," he said, his deep voice warm and genuine. "You're going to change the world with your drawings." Evan looked up at him, his face a mix of awe and joy. "I'm just glad you were there, Shaq," he said. "You're my superhero." The words struck Shaq deeply. He'd spent so many years being a role model for millions of fans worldwide, but this felt different. Being Evan's hero felt like a privilege, something that carried more weight than any accolade he'd ever received. He understood now that the real impact he could make was through moments like these, moments of kindness, protection, and simple friendship. Years passed, and as Evan grew up, Shaq remained a supportive presence in his life. From birthdays to school achievements, Shaq was there, celebrating every milestone and encouraging Evan's dreams. By the time Evan was in high school, he'd blossomed into a talented young artist, winning several awards and even gaining recognition in local art circles. His pieces often featured themes of courage, protection, and resilience, and Shaq knew, without a doubt, that their friendship had influenced the young artist's worldview. One day, Shaq received a letter in the mail, addressed in Evan's now familiar handwriting. It was a beautifully crafted thank you note, filled with memories from their journey together. At the end, Evan had written something that brought tears to Shaq's eyes. "You taught me that real heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just sit in diners, listen to little kids, and stand up when it matters. Thank you, Shaq, for being my hero when I needed one the most." Shaq held the letter close, feeling a wave of emotion wash over him. He hadn't anticipated the impact he would have when he first met that little boy in the diner, but through one brave whisper, a young child had forever changed his life. The two of them, coming from such different worlds, had found a bond that transcended age, fame, and circumstance, a bond built on trust, kindness, and the courage to do what was right. One piece in particular caught Shaq's eye. It was titled "Guardian in the Diner," and as he examined it, he recognized himself and Evan in the stylized rendering of that pivotal day. The image was both haunting and beautiful, capturing the innocence of childhood alongside the lurking threat that had loomed in the background. In the painting, Evan, small and wide-eyed, clung to a towering figure, the Guardian. Shaq recognized the hulking silhouette as himself, a protective presence that overshadowed the ominous, shadowy figure in the background. For a long time, Shaq stood in front of the painting, reflecting on the ripples of that one moment. He realized how the simplest decisions, like stopping at a diner for a meal, could shape lives in ways one might never imagine. He remembered that he'd been in a hurry that day, almost considering another spot for lunch. But something had drawn him to that diner, a quiet nudge of instinct or fate, bringing him to Evan at exactly the right time. Looking at the painting, he knew he'd made a lasting difference. The gallery soon filled with art enthusiasts, critics, and friends, all here to celebrate Evan's accomplishments. Evan's mother, dressed elegantly for the occasion, approached Shaq, her eyes filled with gratitude and warmth. She gave him a hug, one that conveyed 1,000 words. "I still remember the way you looked at him that day," she said, her voice low with emotion. "You saw more than just a frightened little boy. You saw his potential, his courage, and you never stopped showing him that." Shaq nodded, moved. "Evan was never just a little kid. I think he always had an old soul. I just wanted him to feel safe enough to show it to the world." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Evan as he mingled with guests, his demeanor composed and confident. Shaq was struck by how much Evan had grown, both in age and in spirit. Here was the same boy who had once clutched his hand in fear, now self-assured and sharing his art and story with the world. Shaq and Evan's mother continued talking, reminiscing about the years since that day. She shared stories of Evan's growth, his struggles, and the unwavering determination that had guided him through art school. Shaq listened, his heart swelling with pride as he learned about the many challenges Evan had faced on his journey. As they spoke, Evan noticed them from across the room and made his way over, grinning widely. Shaq held out his arms, pulling Evan into a hearty embrace. "Look at you, man, making me feel like a proud dad." Evan laughed, a genuine, joyful sound. "It's all thanks to you, Shaq. I don't know if I would have had the courage to pursue this without your support." They shared a few laughs, and Shaq gently teased him, pointing out how the boy he'd once shielded had become a strong young man with a voice and vision of his own. Evan laughed bashfully before his expression grew serious. "There's something I wanted to tell you, Shaq," Evan said, his tone thoughtful. "This exhibition, it's just the beginning. I want to use my art to help other kids like me, kids who might be going through things no one else can see." Shaq's heart swelled with admiration as he listened to Evan describe his plans. Evan wanted to create a foundation that would provide art supplies, mentorship, and emotional support for children who had experienced trauma. He knew from personal experience how powerful art could be in healing, and he wanted to give other kids the same outlet that had helped him express himself and process his experiences. "Art saved me, Shaq," Evan said, his eyes misting with emotion. When I was too scared or too young to understand what I felt, art was my way of making sense of it all. And you made me believe I could do something meaningful with it. Shaq placed a comforting hand on Evan's shoulder, feeling the weight of the young man's words. Evan, what you're doing is more than meaningful. You're going to change lives, kid. You're going to make a real difference for those kids. A thought began to form in Shaq's mind as he considered Evan's vision. He was no stranger to charitable work, having started his own initiatives and foundations to help underserved communities. But this was different. This was personal, and the cause spoke to something deep within him. He wanted to be a part of Evan's vision, to support him as he built something that could help countless others. Let's do this together, Evan, Shaq said, his voice steady with determination. Let's build this foundation. I'll help with the resources, connections, whatever you need. Evan's eyes widened, a mix of disbelief and gratitude shining in them. Are you serious? Shaq, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Shaq replied, chuckling as he clapped Evan on the back. Say yes and we'll get to work. With that, they agreed to create a foundation that would empower young artists, provide mental health support, and offer resources for children in need. Over the next few months, they worked tirelessly to bring their shared dream to life. Shaq tapped into his network, reaching out to friends, celebrities, and philanthropists who shared their passion for supporting youth and the arts. Evan dedicated himself to designing programs and finding ways to engage children who might benefit from the foundation's support. When they finally launched the Art of Courage Foundation, the response was overwhelming. Families, educators, and child psychologists reached out, expressing how much a program like this was needed. The foundation quickly gained traction, and within its first year, it held workshops, art exhibitions, and mentorship programs in various cities. Shaq attended many of these events, often playing the role of mentor, friend, and even art student as he joined in to learn alongside the kids. For Evan, working with the children felt like coming full circle. He saw himself in so many of them, the quiet ones, the ones who found it hard to open up, and those who expressed themselves through their art, much as he had done. His journey from frightened child to confident artist had given him a unique ability to connect with them, to understand what they needed without them having to say a word. One particular workshop held in Orlando brought back powerful memories for Shaq. It was a Draw Your Hero session, where kids were encouraged to create an artwork of someone they looked up to. Shaq walked around the room, marveling at the kids' creations. There were drawings of parents, teachers, firefighters, and even some superheroes. One little girl, no older than 7, showed him a drawing of herself holding hands with a large, towering figure. She'd drawn him in a kind of protective bubble around her, and beneath the picture she'd written, "Shaq is my hero." The words brought tears to Shaq's eyes. He thought of Evan that day in the diner, how a simple meal had led to a bond that changed both their lives forever. As he knelt down to hug the little girl and praise her drawing, he realized that his connection with Evan had started a chain reaction. One act of kindness had sparked a journey, not just for him and Evan, but for every child who would now find safety, expression, and healing through the foundation. In the years that followed, the Art of Courage Foundation became a staple in communities across the country. They established art therapy programs in schools, opened studios where kids could experiment freely, and funded scholarships for young artists who showed potential and dedication. Shaq and Evan traveled together to cities big and small, meeting with children, running workshops, and creating memories that would inspire future generations. Evan continued to thrive as an artist, his work gaining international acclaim. His art became synonymous with themes of resilience, protection, and empathy, and his exhibitions always attracted a crowd of admirers who were moved by his ability to capture both beauty and strength in his pieces. Shaq often attended his exhibitions, standing in the back, content to watch as Evan's talent and hard work garnered admiration and respect. Years later, Shaq found himself in another gallery, this one an international exhibition in New York where Evan was being celebrated as a leading figure in modern art. Evan's works lined the walls, each one telling a part of the journey he'd taken, each piece a testament to the courage he'd learned to embrace. At the heart of the gallery, a large mural covered an entire wall. It was titled Full Circle, a culmination of Evan's most personal work. The mural depicted the diner from years ago, stylized but unmistakable, with the little boy and his protector seated side by side. Shaq found himself drawn to the mural, his heart swelling with a mixture of nostalgia and pride. As he looked closer, he saw that Evan had added a small inscription beneath the artwork. For everyone who's ever felt afraid, you're not alone. Heroes come in many forms, and sometimes they're right there when you need them the most. Shaq stood quietly in front of the mural, letting the inscription sink in. Evan's words were a reminder of how many lives could be transformed by a single moment of kindness, of presence. The art seemed to capture a journey that had been deeply transformative, not just for Evan, but for Shaq as well. Shaq was proud, yet he also felt a profound gratitude for the experiences that had led them both to this point. He remembered a younger version of himself, someone who had dreamed of achieving greatness on the basketball court, not realizing that his most impactful legacy would be the lives he'd touch off of it. As he continued to admire the mural, a young man approached him, wearing a gallery badge and a look of awe. "Excuse me, are you Shaq?" Shaq grinned and extended his hand. "That's me. Nice to meet you, man." The young man shook his hand with enthusiasm, then hesitated, looking at the mural as if searching for words. "I'm sorry, it's just... I grew up hearing stories about you. You're an inspiration for so many people. And seeing this, reading what Evan wrote, it feels personal, like it's more than just art. I didn't know heroes like you were real." Shaq laughed warmly, shaking his head. "I'm no hero. Evan was the brave one. All I did was listen and show up. Sometimes that's all anyone really needs." The young man nodded thoughtfully. "I guess that's the thing, though. Not everyone shows up. You did." Shaq looked at the mural again, his heart heavy with understanding. The young man's words held truth. Showing up, being there, even when it was unexpected, that was what made a difference. Shaq had spent much of his life in the spotlight, accustomed to crowds and applause, yet it was these quiet, intimate moments that had shaped him, helping Evan that day in the diner, staying in his life, supporting his dreams. It was these moments that gave his own life depth and purpose. As the evening went on, Shaq mingled with other guests at the gallery, many of whom shared stories of how Evan's art had touched them. It was clear that Evan's message of courage and compassion resonated far and wide, transcending the boundaries of age, background, or experience. Parents approached Shaq, thanking him for his role in inspiring their children, some of whom had found their voices through the programs offered by the Art of Courage Foundation. Teachers and counselors spoke of how art therapy programs had transformed classrooms, giving children an outlet for emotions they couldn't yet express in words. At one point, Evan joined Shaq, looking out over the crowd that had gathered. He seemed both humbled and exhilarated, clearly moved by the impact his art and foundation were having. Turning to Shaq, he said, "You know, I never could have imagined this back then. When I was a kid, I was so lost, so scared, and now, all these people are here because of something I was too afraid to believe in at first." Shaq placed a hand on Evan's shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "That's the beauty of life, Evan. Sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you to make you believe in yourself. You've earned this, every bit of it, and you're doing something special. Your courage is helping kids who might feel just as lost as you did." They stood there together, soaking in the moment, united by a bond that had transcended circumstance and time. For Shaq, this was more than a celebration of art or accomplishment. It was a celebration of friendship, of resilience, and of the power of human connection. He felt grateful not only to have been a part of Evan's journey, but to have been changed by it. As the gallery began to empty, Evan's mother approached, her eyes warm with gratitude. "Thank you, Shaq," she said softly, "for everything. You've been a part of our family in a way that goes beyond words. We'll never forget what you've done for us." Shaq hugged her, smiling down at her with warmth. "It's been my honor. You've raised an incredible son. I'm lucky to have met him." As he left the gallery that night, Shaq felt a profound sense of fulfillment. His life, with all its ups and downs, had brought him here, to a moment where his presence had helped to shape a young man's future, sparking a legacy of courage and compassion that would live on through generations. And as he walked out into the quiet, cool night, he knew that this was only the beginning. For Evan, for the children who would find hope through the Art of Courage Foundation, and for himself, this journey had no end. It was instead a ripple that would keep expanding outward, carrying with it the simple, powerful message that one act of kindness could transform a life, and one life could, in turn, transform the world. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us? What are your thoughts on the 5-year-old boy whispering to Shaq in the diner? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.